went to the school and then could not study. That one could not get the study that one is looking for. Then and left that school and went to another school to study that what one is looking for. Then that's how it is.
태맥이 최송으로 와서제 태맥으로 최송도 자만에 태진이 가스가 태맥이 좀 켈링이요 말았어. 태진 가스가.
And that's why the Hinayana says that like we said earlier that the last 3 deeds are only the Buddha state. They don't accept Buddha as enlightened from the very beginning. So that's why they would say he studied and practiced Dharma and then became Buddha and then he started teaching. Then that's how Buddhism came about, how Buddhism came into being. That's how they explain. And that's why Hinayana school do not accept the Mahayana school as Buddha's teaching. And Hinayana school also do not accept the Tantrayana as Buddha's teaching as well. They would say Mahayana school and Tantrayana school is not Buddha's teaching at all. That's why they would. That's why when they write Buddha's life story, they would write in such a way, like you write about somebody, what based on the fact that you have seen through your naked eyes.
I have a question. Is it kind of like the teachers at the time of the Buddha were sort of like nuclear physicists who from different countries, and they all knew the language of metaphysics, but they didn't know the language of the country? Am I making myself clear?
Yeah, you mean that?
And they could all talk to each other, or they were like musicians. They could make music together, but each one played their own instrument. My feeling is that in the early days that it was all mixed up, and that the teachers they didn't make the distinction between Buddhism and Hinduism.
In the early days.
Is that incorrect? Is like that, or?
So you are saying that at the time of the Buddha, all the teachers studied the same religion?
That it was all mixed up. It was kind of like scientists who knew the same methods, or who had their own methods, but they had a multitude of methods which they could understand, even though they couldn't speak the same language.
Sanje shab shudu gane ane gigin digi de ane karsa ore la gigin digi de ane karsa Quran chulu mandawa da ane kanda da na shingi anchi musician da da na shingi ane chi anchi ke sam tancha mandawa mara dine kane kebara yarwe sige san dangi tiwa de yawa sewa chukwa tsumas Sanje shab shudu gane gigin dine yarwa da ma chu shingi ane da chikda gigin yarwa lama digi de sam tancha mandawa da ane anchi chulu ki sam tancha mandawa anchi anchi kalora kaje de tiwas tan keba gegen zo kade kan yer lage se kan do chida keba yoba chele anchi keba mashing na chulu khaga ima chele ro anchi batsi ding ro chulu khaga lo jun chi yoba chele ro anchi chi batsi tiwa de ne re chi
chida de sanje khura sa maje be ko ta do teme china sanje khura ro nyama she shube sanje khura ke sa maje be ngaro do chuda ro chena teme chuda kaza di chiruba tu mangu to chiruba mangu le Hindu chiruba jibu bada moti bada changje bada tende chuda de yer jung yore chiruba chuda yer le ya nangbe ge chuda dan chiruba chuda yin chi ge yena chiruba chuda de jung yen le res jungrim jena chiruba chuda yer jung
if in general if you ask you can divide the religion into two, Buddhist and non-Buddhist, right? If you say which one came into being first, and then we can say the non-Buddhist, such as Hinduism and other non-Buddhists, came into being first, and Buddhism came later, the next. I don't know. I answer your question. I'm not very clear about your question. I'm sorry.
Let's move into another area, perhaps, and we're going to. At about 8 o'clock, we'll just open it up for general questions. I wanted to ask you some questions about the Buddha's teaching and how teaching is carried forward, how did the Buddha himself teach? And how is teaching carried forward now? What are the aspects of teaching, and what's most important in passing the teaching?
How did Buddha teach, and how it has been carrying on until today? Sanje che sundan de kande sombra is yesda. Che sundan Thomas che sundan kande sombra de ma muten ba che de ma muten de ji kyong ya ji sombra ja da kyaben do dan kande chimar is yesda.
chance yu chu da ta gi teaching gi so do teaching gi chogo se gen do da sang ge chogo se gen do yong da chen zao yin song yong ma de sang ji ge yong da chen an dan de xie ban de yong da chen zao yin song yong ma yong da chen de song yang chu chu ro ba yong da chen de song yang chu de teme ge chu de nam sha chu do yong da chen song ma de
영라진 소야마스 가
영라진 소야마스
소야마스 가 메일
teaching gi chu da ma wa de teaching gi chogo jo ro ba tebo chin bi sang ge chogo da do de ge chogo yong zu ba tam jia de sang ji chu song yo ro song ya zhe ge nang du yong da chen zao yin song yo ma de sang ji yong da chen song yo ma nang du yong da chen sang ji ge song de chogo de ka re se la ba yin na teme chogo de se
and in Buddhism we talk about the two school, or you can say three school: Hinayana school, Mahayana school, and Tantrayana school. And the Mahayana and Tantrayana are considered higher school. And in general, what we say is that Buddha did not teach Mahayana and Tantrayana in public, or he did not teach these two types of teaching to general public, to general audience. He taught in the Hinayana school the lower teaching to the general public, to the audience.
general Quran yongda chen ma song de pe jin pa li ge le song yo re
And the teaching of the Hinayana school is taught in the language known as Pali.
di ju ba de ta da ma do Sri Lanka ta ja ga Burma ta do de yo re
And the teaching, the Pali teaching, has been flourished into the countries known as Sri Lanka and Burma and Thailand and so forth.
pe le cha sha ne di dong be dong ju du zo do de go dong ju du zo de ne sam do de go
And some part of those teaching has also, somehow, reached into Tibet.
da de ka song ne da be de
And Sanji che sum thoma sunda ka song che sum dan ka song.
Sure, Thomas one at the time, Sanjay Mobato Sanji with Jabati, and then Warren Nasilia, and then she showed Thomas on Paris, Sanjay Chosman, but then she showed then she showed the Temic Torres.
Buddha achieved his enlightenment at the place known as Bodh Gaya, and then he went to Sarnath, Varanasi, and then he taught his first teaching known as Four Noble Truth to his 5 disciples.
Then she showed Dagana, she took the Domshit and the Dosia to the Temic Torres.
And there are other forms of teaching that includes Four Noble Truth. And those are teaching which are studied and practiced by the Hinayana followers.
다 자고 공부를 시진 도대로 좀 송세야 하는 그주 된디 다 용다 말이지. 용다 자원이 말이지. 간사 깨된 레루진이야. 아니 코란게 거버지 막 송세죠.
And we also talk about, in general, we talk about 3-time teaching. The Buddha taught teaching 3 times at 3 different places in front of 3 different students, having 3 different levels of mental capacity. So the first teaching, which is known as Four Noble Truth, is considered the teaching in general, which can be studied or can be taught to people in general, to the public. But the last 2 teaching is something kind of secret teaching. Mahayana teaching and the Tantrayana teaching are taught at 2 different places to 2 different audience having different levels of mental capacity. But those 2 teachings are not the teaching known as the taught to the public in general. It's only he taught those 2 high level of teaching to very selected students, very selected disciples.
제단 송다잖아. 초고 렘버 송식 라지 뜻이 친구 그랬지. 초고 렘버 송고는 초고 통보도 태명도 그랬지. 이 용다로 그랬지. 다 다가나 초고 콜로 바바다 타마세도 왔디. 다 용다로 좀 말했지. 용다로 좀 말했지.
So the first teaching is the first teaching, which is known as Four Noble Truth, is studied and practiced by the Hinayana school, and the last two teachings are a kind of secret teaching, kind of teaching which is not taught to general public. Those two teachings are known as the Mahayana and Tantrayana. And especially the Tantrayana teaching is taught to very, very selective students. It's very, very selective students, not to everybody. In general, we say that Buddha taught 84,000 volumes of teaching. And gradually, right after Buddha's passing into nirvana, the teaching somehow degenerate. So this is kind of long story.
Well, it's interesting because I think right after Jesus, there was that kind of sense that there were levels of teaching, but at a certain point about 4 centuries later, there's a kind of sorting out, and really only what you might call the Hinayana, the more available path was chosen as the orthodox path, and those more esoteric, you know that word?
Esoteric.
The more esoteric teachings have almost passed away. We do have some traces of those, but they've almost disappeared. One of the things I was interested in was the role of the teacher, because I notice how important each of you is. The fact that you are here, that you're physically here, is so important to us. And we could read, I suppose, what you've said, but it makes an enormous difference that you're here.
Okay.
So what is the role of the teacher, the being of the teacher, the person of the teacher, and the relationship between teacher and student in Buddhism?
지난 산지기 지송분한 신기 산지 주디마 도마지 소안 지 타라마고 있어라 디나 신기 휴나를 돼서 열에서 건다 타라마고 있어서 진짜 라바도 지 히나야나 저도디 대명 저도디 무슨 대명 저다고 다고 송샤고디 갈가서 냠면도 냠자징도 자더레스 나지 냠자징나지 지그레스 지난에 데다디 가서다 있는데 기지다 가서 님한테 대화하죠 라마디 and then gain Gishilani dos Gini dos and Chile Yavati, then other than gain Gishilak Sunday, and the Devna Lone and Digores. In a train, the Mus de Mus Ran Gishila de Yavachan, the magic song, the Gani, the Mixegi, and Azolachi, so Kavach does one. And there is Sozani Nambicanalia, and Givishini the Lama the Loma Sorda, Givishini the Gidu Paralea, Devashadan. You are asking mainly about the relationship between the student and teacher. What kind of relationship it should be between the teacher and student? Again, the guru para get dewa the condition go res guys da.
Again, guru para dewa the shita thing sabu go res.
The relationship
guru go again the shita go tong chimbu. Again guru the shita the zidong chimbu go res.
The relationship between the student and teacher in Buddhism should be very profound, should be very pure, very pure and very precious relationship. And the student should have genuine respect towards his teacher, and teacher should have genuine love and compassion to his student.
Ta teleya habo do ki guru go to shatan teleya and rembo mangu yores.
So we can. There are so many different levels of relationship that we can talk about between the student and the teacher.
Yene tanda ye guru go gegen le shita go kuzu chimbo da zidong chimbo che go ya chi ta gegen ge yene ya guru ti lama no wala tiya ya shita ge be gegen ji go yores. Gegen chane ya guru ti lama no wala tiya ja tambe gegen ti gegen ji ke go res. 기록이 있는 기계 때문에 남만노 벌 튀긴 지기 이벌 자자 탐바기 이제 련게 지네 배 굳이 친구 주고 해야
From the teacher's part, teacher must take the whole responsible that to take lead his or her student towards the ultimate destination or towards the right destination or ultimate goal. And from the student's part, he or she should have genuine respect and genuine love towards his or her teacher.
이 장에서 배충주 시기
A small example that relates to the relationship between teacher and student.
지단 지나 대산 전부를 뒤가래 변주시고 된사도 와
You know,
변주시 대관제 축부시고 차사도 왔어
in general, we can say in different country, especially in a country like America, you can see you have so many very luxurious libraries, and all kind of books that are available to study.
하나씩 컴퓨터에서 직도와 전부를 충주되는 동영상도 왔어 근데 이제 진짜도 왔어
Today, it's not like before. You have the computers in which you can see the whole world.
강바 충주되는 전부를 오버 소식도 왔어
It's like a computer is carrying the whole universe, or whole world.
저도 얘가 거야 명예를 주고 왔어
You might think or say you don't need teacher at all because you can have all this information.
얘네 포르셀 시간도 보다 티저 시간도 보다 근데 뭐망고 질이야 도서쇼 땅에 지기도 왔어
But you still have a lot of professors and a lot of different levels of teachers, different levels of professors, different levels of teachers for whom you have to spend a lot of money for them to teach.
이거 왜 민도 와오네잖아
And actually, you don't need all those professors and teachers because you have all sorts of books and all sorts of libraries and computers. You have all the information available.
얘네 거기 얘기 고고도 왔어 개친구 시고
But you still need a teacher.
티인데 나도 섬류 나로가 야제 방야스도 와 생그 시대 중요한 시간에 얘기한테 대장 거는 다시 와서 그랬어
So, despite having all the information available out there, you still need teacher. So, of course, when you need to improve your inner world, which is mind, mental quality, and eliminate mental faults, of course, you definitely need a teacher who can, help you eliminate all the negative things of the mind and cultivate positive things of the mind.
텔로선 당하면 누가
But for that, you don't have to spend money.
얘기 찍고야 차서 왔어
So you can think, do you really need teacher or not?
얘기를自动 친구
So you can, in other words, you can think whether or not you really need to have respect towards your teacher. This is just a small example.
This may have been self-serving of me to ask you that question because I am a teacher, so I liked that. And I think it's important for Christians to hear in our own scriptures the early witness of how important the relationship was between teacher and student. And Paul really talks to people in his churches about imitating him and others who are faithfully following Jesus. Watch, see what they do the same things that they do, learn from them, be close to them. And now I think we tend to pick up Paul's letter in a book now and we read it as though it could be the teacher. And I think it's so important for us to grasp this again. There's some elements of Buddhism that are so deeply related to early Christian ways of being, and this is one of them, that emphasis on real living community of people who are trying to follow the same path and seeing the image in one another. And one of the things I think is so beautiful is that I see your image on some of my friends who study with you and learn from you, and that's just so important. That's the Buddha taking shape in them, and I love to see that.
Okay, next.
I think we're ready for questions from this rapt audience. Yeah, Liz?
I have a question. I was in Lhasa and went to a monastery and saw the monks teaching each other out in a courtyard, and there were 3 or 4 of them, and they were very animated as they quoted scripture and tried to catch one another in something that was wrong. And they were having a good time studying the scripture, and yet when we went to another country like Thailand in a monastery, we didn't see any kind of examples of the monks teaching each other in that same way. Was that strictly a Tibetan practice?
Quran pel chin lasa chin sen lasa na le ani kaut yar sen da chi chiro da odne na ya ta odne beja lo ding da na jing pa zo ba jab sig ser den do pa zo chi tere chin zo ba ja da ton ser ton sun ser ani lo jen ta da na be chi lo jen chi du ser Quran Thailand lo ma shin da do na be lo ma shin da Thailand don chin de le ya ani ta wa zo de lo jen chi me wa ton so de lo jen chi de be be ta wa chi bor ve sig ser be ta lo jen chi da to mai ba jer ve sig ser
저 베베 토모 많이 말아 뒤 주바드 칸에서 공부루루는 막 뺐다 줘 했어. 날렌더가 로준 지나들 했어.
저번에
얘네 라발라 근데 제대로 날렌더 로주 말했어. 얘네 전다게 지금 돌렌 제당당 저버저당당 도저 지나 줘 그랬어. 뒤 맞아 날렌더는 막 용조랬어. 맞아 베베 사바스 요게 말했어.
The way in which we study in the monastery, that includes the monastery in Tibet. Today we have monastery in India. We read the scriptures, and then of course we learn the meanings from teachers, and then we will have discussion. We'll have kind of debate, and then this is the system of studying is coming from the school university, which is at the time of Buddha known as the Nalanda University and Vikramshila University. So it's started or initiated by the Indian master known as the Nagarjuna. So the way in which we study. So that's why how Tibetan monks study in such a way, by studying the scriptures and then discuss the meaning and debate over the differences that they find in the scripture spoken by different masters of that time.
야 이제 다 같이 라긴다. 야랑 저버저야도 마대대 하시도 와도 니 먹고 했지더랬어.
In Tibetan,
야 랑에 되게 좋았던 거 그랬어. 마대게 되게 랭자고 그랬어. 얘는 야랑 마당 라바답지 생생이 지기도 니 먹고 했지더랬어.
I guess this is just joke. I think. In Tibetan Buddhism, you will see, especially in the Tibetan big monastery, you would see monks, study Buddhist philosophy by debating. You would see one monk sitting on the floor and one monk standing up and raising question, and the one who is sitting would be answering his questions. So this is we do this kind of we study philosophy in such a way because not to be able to stay awake. So otherwise if you sit down and sit down all the time for a long time, then you might fall asleep. So if you stand up and be active, and hit one's palm on another one like this, and this is how we debate in the monastery. You go like this, one who is asking question. So this is kind of could be the reason that we can stay awake all the time, and I guess this is just.
Earlier you were saying about the three forms or levels of teaching. Is there any given sort of criteria to be toward the more secret teaching?
Criteria to be whether or not
Is there a selection process to be toward
what level of teaching can be taught to? Okay, I think I got the point, I guess.
I mean, how do you know who's ready for which kind of teaching?
Okay. And Then Sanjay the Chu, the Rimbasum, Tewa member Dan, Tewa Chamber, the Sanga, the Rimbasum, Kansa Rimbasum, Sunshas, and the Sanjay, the Kandisanga, the Kandisak, or Cherimba, Taming the Colosunadi, Tewa Chamber, the Colosunadi, Sanga, the Colosunadi, the Negi, Manzukandis, Kansa Yawacheto, Resiota, Dile Kejo, Yervesi, what the Taming she shares the Kija Sangor said, or Tewa Chamber, she shares the Kija Sangor, Sanjay Sanga, Kija Sangor,
Sanjay Koran. gyön kunse yönden kunden jiga yönden yonsu topa tamse zo gyön yonsu tamse pan yesu sa kansa tegi kamdan nöba da karı ile çamara la koran kin tugu yores ben ngaran zos ali kin tugu yores
Buddha taught 3 different levels of teaching to 3 different levels of students having 3 different levels of mental capacity. Why? Because the reason because he did teach in such a way in 3 different levels because Buddha is someone who has eliminated all the ignorance, all the afflicting emotions, all the faults, and accumulated or developed all the developed the wisdom to develop his highest wisdom, I should say, through which he can see and read others' mind, others' mental capacity, or others' mental disposition as well. So that's why he, based on his perception of the students, he taught the teaching.
A question kind of along with that, I was wondering, I've been to see the Dalai Lama to hear some of his lectures and his teachings. So is he teaching on the Hinayana, or is he teaching on the Mahayana level when he speaks to the general public here in the West?
Okay. 야름스기 제 송진 송마고 송도 시에 누절이야 라보 아리나 마고 송도 대 송에 되네 가서 송나오랑 송제 되게 되네 대화 멤버 제 송대와 대화 침배 송제 송거를 상하 제 송, 거를 송거를
산제 야름스기 뭔가 갑자기 되는 두고 원진에서 나들은 왕들 나고도 태화심이 나 주고 송거 알아? 아니 준주들 송고도 와. 근데 대바심 비셔 송고 그랬어. 남리들 송고도 와. 대바심 비셔 송고 그랬어. 대시 쪽거든 송고도. 그래서 대미 줘 송고 그랬어.
Yes, his always teach all different levels of teaching in the West, and for example in America as well. He teaches when he teaches or when he gives empowerment, such as Kala Chakra empowerment, and that means he's giving tantric teaching, or empowerment and so forth. When he's teaching, such as the teaching known as Bodhisattva's way of life, or also the Lamrim, which is known as the stages of the path leading towards enlightenment. Those teachings are considered the teaching of the Mahayana school. And when Lamrim is also Mahayana teaching. And in English they call the stages of the path leading towards enlightenment. And those teachings are known as considered the teaching of Mahayana. And when he teaches about the Four Noble Truths, or explains the meaning of Four Noble Truths, which is Buddha taught first time, and when he teaches that teaching, then he is teaching the teaching for the Hinayana school followers.
Yeah,
I'd like to ask you a question and give you a small example. Back to you. He's going to Geshe is going to tell you that how Buddha come to know. How did he know that the mental disposition or mental capacity of his students? This is the answer that relate to your first question. And like you can see in the society, there are some people who had all kind of experience, who had studied all kind of things. And those people can tell just by looking at the people what he or she likes. To some extent, he or she, they can tell that what you are thinking, what you like, what you dislike, your mental attitude, what kind of personality you have, Based on those knowledge, he or she would tell you something and that you can agree with, and that you can understand, you can grab the meaning, in the same way, Buddha is not only like that. He is far superior than those person. He is someone who is enlightened, who has eliminated all the negative afflicting emotion or faults or ignorance, and managed to develop his wisdom to its highest level. So of course Buddha can see or read your mind and our mental capacity and mental disposition and so forth. And based on that knowledge, he teaches his teaching.
Can I ask you a question, Jane?
All right.
Because I had the opportunity to go to your classes a number of times, and I'm just curious to know, from your point of view, why you think Christians have such an interest in Buddhism.
Oh, golly. That's a great question. I think part of it, I mean, we're a very small world now, so we know about the religions of lots of different people, and we have to take account of that. So there's sort of the factual level. But I think, we've hit upon some things tonight in which I think I've probably suggested ways in which I think Buddhism has something to say to how we are currently practicing Christianity that might bring us back to a place we've been before but have forgotten that we need. I mean, I think one of the cries of our heart right now is for really genuine human healing companionship. And I think that teacher-student relationship and how a community works like that is potentially important. I think the really serious, the emphasis on practice, what you do daily. My stepdaughter is Buddhist, and her practice is a daily practice. She isn't Buddhist because of something she believes with the head. She's Buddhist because of what she does with her day, starting with the first thing she does in the day and then going throughout the day. And I think Christians have tended to define Christianity by beliefs and not by practices. And I think that's a saving word for Christians. So I just think there's a potentially really wonderful thing happening right now in which it's not a time perhaps for just stirring all the religions together, but for hearing our own path more sharply, more clearly, in a more lively way because of hearing how others practice. I think we can be of good to one another somehow. And my own experience as a Christian is just of how life-giving it's been to learn more about Buddhism and to hear that in relationship to Christianity, not as things that are the same, but as things that can live together. Think of Jesus and Buddha are friends, and I just think they have something to say to one another that's life-giving. Do others of you have that experience? No, there's a no in here, but there's some yeses and some nos.
Any questions? Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to make an observation in terms of the similarity between the way Jesus lived and the way Buddha lived after his enlightenment. Jesus broke some of the rules of his day, and a lot of that was through his love and compassion for his fellow human beings. He reached out to Mary Magdalene. He reached out to the lepers. He reached out to the blind and to the poor. Buddha did the same thing. In India, there was a very specific system of classes, socially, a social structure, and social interaction between classes was dictated very strictly. And the Buddha, from what I understand, ignored those, and actually one of his disciples was chosen from the lowest class in Indian society, who were supposed to be invisible. They were so low that all the other classes ignored them, and they were supposed to get out of the way. And there's a story that one of these men was digging through the trash, and the Buddha came along and noticed him. And he was shocked because he knew that the Buddha was coming, and he was supposed to just get out of the way and just be invisible. And the Buddha actually reached out to him in a way that you were talking about, that he could sense the mental capacity of others, and chose this person and said, would you leave your life and follow me? Very similar to the way Jesus chose his own disciples, or very ordinary people. And the man, of course, said, sure. And he was at the lowest class of society, and everybody ignored him, and he became one of Buddha's faithful disciples. And I think that's a very strong commonality between the essence of the way they lived their lives.
Kurangi nangbe che da ishu ni para lakwa Jesus Christ sanje ki zeba la ya zeba zejora tumo ne jiba zeba yujora tonang kalchong sana Jesus ki Kurangi ishu nangi chulu nangi ishu chona lebe dikzu dine makushi timdo makushi domba makushi ba shikje sim shenle ya pendo che do timdo makushi ba timdo zime che shenle pendo che resi wa pena rik la gyobo dine la wacha mo chus ne la wacha ne gyobo la wa zine gyoro dine la wacha mo chus ne la wacha an saje do ma chus ne do che ne ro ba che ne che resi shu na shin sanje ge dus na sha sanje ni ma san sha fi do ga ya le ya rik thome se sam shu shu shi sa resi ni ma tome samsu shukche moshi dosi yina ya sanji ki dike san zime tangche ani rik ma shuki kansa chiraba chili ya sanji Kuran lega chido kabli ya Kuran sanji Kuran peche ani kirangi giru chigimbe ni loma chigimbe du sonche Kuran loma le ya ngulen che shaas Jesus Christ ke dina shingi mi mangu chili ya Kuran loma dus rik kyobo dini mangu chili ya Kuran loma ngulen che dana shingi sanji dus tangsha ting zeba dhawde tumo ni sanji zeba teta zeba Jesus Christ ke zeba dhawu dosi wada kunyi jiri le yeme chindo zeba de peme singi now do to do so as a in Buddhism we don't discriminate about the classes. We don't do discrimination saying this is high class and this is low class, we don't have this kind of discrimination. The Buddha is one of the Buddha's most closest disciple, known as Nyento in Tibetan. I don't have the English or Sanskrit term. He is one of most close Buddha's disciple, and he is also from very low class. Very low class. I think what he does as a living is he makes the shoes. The shoes maker. So they at the time those people are considered very low. It's kind of like untouchable or like invisible. And at the time there was a king, Buddha, kind of ordered the king to pay his respect, bow down and pay respect to his disciple, the one who was used to be from low class. He even ordered the king to pay respect to that monk. When we receive full ordination, or let's say full ordination and half ordination, which is known as novice ordination, and also we talk about the upasaka in Sanskrit and upasika, the ordination for which one takes 5 precepts, and those ordination or precepts are taken or received according to the tradition of the Hinayana school. The Hinayana school. And according to the rules and regulation of the precepts described in Hinayana tradition, they are actually very strict discipline, very strict precept that they have, and one has to observe those strict discipline when one receives ordination and so forth. But when one observe those precepts continuously and develops his or her mental capacity and wisdom and so forth, and gradually, when one becomes more kind of purified being, and then there is more. One can be more liberal, in terms of practicing or observing one's precept. Does it get me? One can be more liberal. One is given more kind of freedom. And that's done by the Buddha. Buddha gives more kind of liberal, or freedom to those beings because they have been practicing, observing those precepts for a long time, and one has become more kind of purified, more kind of matured person, so he or she enjoys more kind of freedom and not really have to be strict with those precepts. It's almost like when you are in the school.
laptop 보고 충주 디지레지 근시 우치 로고도 팀들이 키네 아니 야야야도 양 고양 로고도 왔어 고로중 내세 토토토도잖아요 고양 로고도 왔어.
It's almost like when you are going to school. When you go to school in the beginning, in elementary school and so forth, you have your own uniform and so forth. Strictly you have to observe those rules. But when you completes your high school and then gets into college and so forth, and you don't have to have those uniform. You have more kind of freedom, to do in a way you want to do. This is just so when you become more wiser, more educated, and then you enjoy more freedom. This is just a small example.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I was late. Very sorry. My apologies. I grew up. I was baptized a Christian, and in my path I have joined some of the major Christian religions, and most recently started worshiping with a Buddhist group here in San Antonio. And in my ignorance, because I have, and this is me, with all due respect to everyone in the room, this is me. I've been so frustrated with many of the religions I have joined, and I've lived in Japan for a while, and when I came back, I joined this Buddhist group in San Antonio, and I started finding out that there are many sects of Buddhism, and I was very frustrated because I was looking for that one tone, the truth, and then I joined the group, and I find out that just what we've been talking about, this group, and who started first, and it was all the same. And with all due respect, again, I mean no disrespect, this is my frustration that I'm putting out there, because it's like I'm looking, and I can't find it. And so far, and I'm reading, forgive me, but my book, and it's so weird that I saw this Sunday in the paper, because I have found no quarreling with the Christ, as my understanding of the Christ, and Buddhists. I mean, it's just been, there have been many moments of, that has been resonating. But I was very surprised to find out there were so many divisions of Buddhism. I don't know why. I thought it was just, I had found it, I don't know if that's a question.
Yeah, so that makes you frustrated. That gives kind of frustration. Okay.
But it's my frustration, because I know that in here, there is that resonance. I just, I'm listening, and I'm getting older, and running out of time, and I have to find it.
No.
I suppose, though, when I pass over, I will truly find it. And then, thank you.
Okay.
That had actually been one of my questions for you, was sort of in relating to others. And we've talked a little bit about Buddhism's relationship with other religions, and we talked about respect. But what are the relationships among different sects of Buddhism? Is that good? Is it smooth? Is it difficult?
Or
Is it
in Buddhism,
awkward?
it's a different relationship between the different sects of Buddhism. And sorry.
But they might want to hear that, at your temple, I mean, you're Tibetan and then you have a Zen Buddhist priest, correct? And, I mean, that's an interesting thing. So you could say how that came to be.
Yeah, where I live in the temple?
Here.
Okay.
About-
I live in Vietnamese Buddhist temple, and I'm a Tibetan Buddhist. I don't know how to say it. I'm from Tibet, Tibetan, and I see a little bit kind of a difference in the way in which we do rituals, and also a little bit difference in the way we explain things, So that's all I can say. But I managed to live in harmony and have understanding the differences that we have in between, and I can. For me, it's not a big surprise because I know that there is different way of explanation about Buddha's teaching. So that's not kind of shocking for me because I absolutely understand people that we have differences in certain point of view. Anyway, back to the questions. And Moran said this one. Moran chidane issue insta issue imbe yonte mo shushes kada mo dodo china moran issue lo chin sa ne ne para je di ka kiu ma chung da kana dewa re chung ma do shi go da ani nambe chi chin group ne sto so de le ya ko na tu ga nambe chi le ba shu che de malam da ta da nambe chi che ta ro chen lo chung go re zo yin so da an tu je ne gan zam je the lobjun chin shi jo shi za lobjun che go zo ne nang ba de be dodo nge sa koran moran sa ba le nang ba stu gan chi dodo re chi den ba stu khara yin ba chi ani chi sang ye chi mo da chi nyar gur de me chi na zo na chi ta chi gilo nya ji ma mo go jero da de se mo go shi wa de re chi mai ba dodo ro chi de ba chi do ji mo ro ji sam ju le lo shi pa so ta shi na zo ko ne re men do se ben de me de ma go shi de gan be go re nan be ko bi sem shi ma cha do se ko da ngara lo ya kana zo le so de ne lobjun che to me da lobjun chin tum de ji da ka ten sa ma sa ma de ji sam ju le do se de ngara chi wa in le na ha ko mo de ne sam ju do se de le ya It is very understandable. Your frustration is very understandable, I guess.
You just served it.
Your frustration is very understandable because, like you said, there are so many differences, different sects in Buddhism as well. Like you see different sects in Christianity, like you would see different sects in Hinduism, different sects in Muslim. It's everywhere in all the religion. And so your frustration is when you since you started studying and practicing Buddhism, you develop kind of frustration. It's very understandable, it happens, So, but the point is that you have to know which kind of sect of Buddhism you need to choose, which suits your mind. You need to choose and then study and practice to reach your goal.
Nangba chigi nenda, Hindu chigi nenda, Kaji chigi nenda, Chulu tamji ki, Tangma suya da karisu gosa na sim tangma suya kechi shigo wares. Sim tangma suya kechi shigo yos, sim di tanda pato sim di pe nyokbo shigo de yores, gonyokbo shigo de yores. Sim di gonyokbo de so ko tangma suya da gonyokbo yores, de suya cheba yina gonyokbo yores.
Geshe is saying that you don't have to be very frustrated, seeing there is so complex, teaching, so many types or sects of teaching that you found in Buddhism. It is similar to all the religion that you can find, and just as Buddhism, the teaching of Buddha or Buddhism is teaching of Buddhism is to purify one's mind, and purify one's mind and develop one's wisdom. And the point of the reason why we study and practice Buddhism is to purify one's deluded mind, or eliminate one's ignorance and all the afflicting emotions and so forth, and develop all the wisdom and positive emotions and so forth. That's the point. That's the reason we study Buddhism. It is, and also it's in the same case with the in terms of other religions such as Muslim. Also, and also the reason they practice or study and practice Muslim is because they need to get it from all the trash that they have in their mind, and then develop its positive side. It is also in the same case with Christianity. It's the same case with and other religion as well. So, but you don't have to be frustrated, because it is difficult. It is frustrating because when we look at the methods, so many different levels of methods that we have in order for us to be able to purify our deluded mind. Because it's not the easy task. It's very, very difficult, most difficult task, because our mind has been deluded, has been confused from the very beginning of our lifetime. So it is not an easy task. If this task is easy one, then those who are Muslim, following Muslim, might have become already the Muhammad, and those who are practicing Christianity might have already become Jesus Christ, and those who are practicing Buddhism might have all of them might have become Buddha as well. So this it takes time, and it's kind of sometimes of course you might find it frustrating and difficult.
Oh.
Can you speak a little bit about the Buddhist belief in life after death?
On next life, past life, yeah. Ngazu nambegi kyo chimada ngamada chimada killing your vessel. Killing that we believe the existence of our past life and future life as well. If we don't believe in the existence of past life as well as in the future life, then of course we don't need this religion. We don't need religion. You can do whatever you feel like to do. You don't have to get into these complex issues. It's just kind of torturing yourself.
The last thing.
Yeah, last one.
On a social or a community level, if you had two children and you were studying, and one was excelling or doing better than the other, like within a class, in much the way in a Western, like a school, there's a lot of prestige or sort of mana associated with being sort of head of the class, or is there any sort of social attitude like that is noticeable?
I didn't get it.
I mean, among a group of Buddhist students,
Yeah.
is there a kind of hierarchy? Those who
Not so much, but just is it more as an attitude than a real strict hierarchy?
Can you
is some
simplify a little?
students honored more than others because they're doing better at their study? Say someone who's studying to be a monk, are some considered more adept at that or more skilled? I mean, because I think this comes from the fact that you've talked about how a good teacher knows a student's capacity, right?
Right.
And sort of knows who's able to study
Mm-hmm.
what. But is there a certain honor given to students who are able to do the more difficult teachings, for example? Is that what you're asking?
Let's say it's sort of if you were a parent and one child was doing better than the other, is there a kind of an attitude associated with the good student and the poor student? So, yeah.
How you mean? In other words, how you judge the student who is a good student or bad poor student? Is something like that, right?
Or are they all
What
honored
is the-
equally?
How?
But like in
Are they all respected
in life, are they
In a social context.
yeah, they're more in a social context.
Not an education.
In social.
Is there any competition in Buddhism? Is that the question?
While in the studying when they're studying, right?
Like if there is a better student and not such a good student
Oh, okay.
from say the same family or the same community, are they more revered? Is there a sense of pride or
the poor student get picked on.
Within just a family structure.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
within the family structure, not necessarily scholarly,
Mm.
but just.
Or within the playground type
Okay.
situation where those are the bright kids.
So in other words, you are asking which, if let's say there are 5 kids, who can be considered the best kids, and who is considered poor kids, or
If it is known who is the better student amongst his peers,
Yeah, I think Jane.
is there
Mm.
some sort of
Mm.
attitude associated with being the better student?
Or there might be that attitude, but it might not be encouraged.
Okay. Then this is more than what is say which can go to the this is another jig Nanchu Jang Jidangi Lobjun Chingi Lobtu Nalia Lobtu Lobjun Chingi Nalia and Lobtu Kadijili and Namju Demba Sigre Lobtu Kadij Demba Lobtu Kadijili Namju Mingi the Namju Yangi Namshajda Jig Chikin Shin the rich quality about the del quality may over do Chidan Kadijni Yawad Masan Chigre Sigamero the nearest Sigasata Namji Yendi Namji English Namji Mingish condition Yawa Chigre condition Tajur Chigre Slagasata Lobtu Lobjun Chinganalia
낭쇼 로주시나.
Nanji in the Chidan in the Karina Lagasata
낭쇼 쓰기를 지단 이제
Nanji Karina Lagochidan the Niga Lagasata
간했어.
Nanji Lobjun Chinging by another Chidan Lobjun Chingana the Pook originally up Namji Yang Sigre Lobjun the state and Digas Love to Pook originally Namji Minga Lobjun the Tena Digman the quality Telemas Tegodus Tajuchiada Ninjik Lave the condition or is Lagas a condition she didn't love us Lagas and thank you. No, you can just say what you said to Mother.
다른 게 디스다 어떤 거.
Let me have this peanut.
I think the fact that he doesn't completely understand the question is very revealing, because most Americans would understand that question immediately, and the fact that there's no real framework for it might be your answer.
Of Geshe of the Geshe saying offering is made here, but nobody is eating it, so he just started eating.
아, 다들 그 코너 드시 쓰고 고마워.
그런 게 세우신 것 좀. Can you simplify what he's asking?
See, I think that's the answer, because he's
Maybe he can
asking a question for which you don't have a framework. You don't have those terms that he's using. And
I guess.
Maybe
I didn't.
yeah,
any preferential treatment, does an enlightened child get to go sit with the Dalai Lama? Or
Sits in front of
Well,
the
not even to that extent, more to the point, is there just a social attitude?
yeah.
like among the children themselves, or among people, or
Their community, yeah.
Social attitude.
or what?
We're in a very Western way. If you have a classroom of students, the best student
Best student, okay.
within the classroom is just known as the best student.
Okay.
But then socially, they may, their parents and their family may be very proud of them and hold them in higher esteem
Okay, I understand that.
because they're excelling in a given class.
Yeah, I understand that.
나는 이제
And then within the classroom itself, that sort of top student within their peer group will be considered or given or afforded some mana or prestige. Yeah, and respect for their knowledge.
So you are asking, do we have this kind of thing in the Buddhism?
Yeah, it just not strictly, but just kind of in general amongst like.
Kind of like that.
Yeah, like the students will go, oh, he knows more than I do, and they
They were,
respect them for their
okay,
knowledge.
okay. They like I said, kind of nanju nalia gidu the loma lobjun chingi na bi nabi jangi loma deje dina kashi ani pe zebi chaji aji kubachi da sameki guru da jayro da kashi aji ma de yo de ki khebara yor bes ge sa
그랬을게.
nabi chena nabi lobjun chingi loma lobju yor da lob de kashi be namje ya jum zengi ani lobjun ya aji tombul le to da ji 남식 세트인지로 럽진 좀 대신부 되게 콜이야지 그보다 지 굴티다 가요라 징게 발라서 거든라 되네다 맹해들이 아직 교가진 하데 내 열베스 여서
근데 요 말이스 지단 남배 추기 개인 원의 기록을 따당시도 가. 그 내제 유행이네다. 맹행이네다. 그 신유네다. 그 남배 추기 lok중 제게 줘라. 개인들이나 개인들은 건 따당들다. 개인 원의 따다디 기루디 천년마도 그 개발을 샤서는 때 다녀보다야다. 코지를 샤 다르는 다야다. 코지 민의를 샤서는 다녀보다. 콜지 통도스 다녀보다야다. 근데 싸워는 요 말이스. 미 의주고 개발야. 요 말이 신유 연쟁 개발야. 요 말이 개인 원의 기루 상만을 뜻인데 천년다 그랬어.
I think you are talking about kind of your question relates with to the relationship between the teacher and student. I guess that's what he's understanding. I guess he's saying that from the teacher's part, the teacher has to extend his or her love or compassion towards all the students, disregarding his or her mental capacity, levels of mental capacity. You don't say teacher won't say I treat him best because he's the most smartest kid in the school among the students. He will not say, he won't do that. He won't treat special to someone saying he is the best, and he won't treat someone kind of with less affection, with less compassion and love, saying he or she is not doing well or is not that smart, not that bright. In other words, the teacher should have same level of love and compassion and treatment towards all the different students, different levels of students he has. I think.
하든도 얘기지. 하든도 나님만 공부를 많이 되지 배제 treat 잠바네 기루도 배제 treat 잠바네 하버도 배 리버 교부 되는 믹스가 나 콜이야. 기후를 채워지게 요새. 그런 게 들으지레스.
And also, not only that, the teacher should pay more attention to those kids who are less intelligent, who are able to study less. Even though they try their best, they put their effort, but they are not able to study well. They are not able to grab the point. You should help them understand. The more you should help them more, thinking that he or she is a little bit backward, in terms of their intelligence. And that's what he did when he was teaching in the monastery.
I understand. I was more asking in regard to the attitude amongst the students.
Among students, okay.
Not so much the teacher.
Okay.
But how the students
They treat each other, react to each other.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm getting a little bit better. Lobjo Quran's nanglo pazu chi lobjo yengele kuba chia da lobjo mengele yan chi tongjong chia la so di yeres la
지금 말했어.
samati ko chi ra sam.
지금 시끄러.
Lobjo yeng ma de. I think the students they have this equal respect to each other. If let's say if the same class, the student of same class have equal respect to or equal treatment to each other, disregarding the levels of mental capacity.
다 두주 때서 요소 공개면 같이 안 하바도 창조기 트와틀네 지하티 토래 나는 미세가 로게 막고 총송스 그냥 가고 좀 토치나 쇼기
And since time is running up, we run out of the time, so we apologize for the organizers, and we've been unable to have been very punctual, and anyway, thank you very much for all of you for being here and asking a lot of questions, and he personally gained a lot of knowledge and things to think about in the future to have better answer. And thank you very much for
One announcement I would like to make. My wife Carolyn has lost a ring which was given by His Holiness Sakya Trizin, and she thinks it was in this room. And we're wondering if anybody should happen to describe it.
It's a Tibetan saddle ring. It's